Okay, I guess that means I'm ready.
Have your choice.
My experience with the Vietnam War involved a friend of mine that I met when I was 18 years old. He was a foreman at a place. I used to work in San Carlos for a place that made furniture for hotel rooms. And I knew him for 3 years, and it took 3 years for him to even talk about his experiences there. And what happened was one day he showed me this. It's called a Purple Heart, and you only get it when you're... Wounded in battle. Yeah. And so he told me about this, and there's an inscription on the back of it. It says, that which comes from the heart.
Your server is taking a big group over there on the other side of the restaurant. Is anybody order? Does anybody else make an order?
He needs an order.
Yeah, that's why I'm here, because of him. You want to make an order too? Okay. You take this order.
Keep going.
Okay, the inscription that he wrote on back of it is called "That Which Comes from the Heart," and he had this engraved because he never wants to forget the men who died over there. You know, these men died for my right to complain about how bad of a day I had. And so, but the one part that I never got was into other initials after it. It's LVUP. And it took me a while that it means love you, Pete. And that's what he was talking about to the men that were, you know, that died over there. So that which comes from the heart, I love you, Pete. And so for anybody who ever, you know, for these people that get these, you know, they made almost the ultimate sacrifice. They took a bullet, they took an arrow, they took something. And now, that's Pete's story, but now what we're more interested in is Mike's story, how Mike sees the war, and his tales of the Vietnam War.
Thank you. I'm going to sit for a minute, then I'll get up and talk. What I want to do is I'm going to play a little short video with a song, and see if you can name that song by the end of the song, and then just look at the images, because it's pretty impressive. This was put together for a special Vietnam Veterans Recognition Program by some high school. Can you hear it?
In this dirty old part of the city, where the sun refused to shine, people tell me there ain't no use in trying. Now my girl, you're so young and pretty, and one thing I know is true. If you did before your time was here, I know. Watch my daddy in bed and cry. Watch his hair been turning straight. He's been working and slaving his life away. Oh yes, I know. He's been working so hard. I've been working too, baby. Every night and day. We gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do, we gotta get out of this place. There is a better life for me and you. Now my girl, you're so young and pretty, and one thing I know is true, yeah, you'll be dead before the time is due. Know it. Watch my daddy in bed and time. Watch his hair been turning baby. Somehow I know we gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do, we gotta get out of this place. There's a better life for me and you. Believe me, baby, I know it, baby. You know it too.
So what was the name of that song? Let's Get Out of This Place. That was the theme song for the vets, the Vietnam guys when I was there. I was there from July of '69 to July of '70. When were you over there?
October to October, 67, 68.
Oh, so you got to go there with that.
Yeah, it's a little disruptive.
Okay, I'm gonna go over a presentation. Most of you know that I don't give talks to high school kids and college kids and other organizations. John, Rotary clubs, we give a short, brief session of this presentation. And my friend Bill Green, who's an Army grunt, and myself give this presentation. And we basically start, I'm going to give the beginning of the presentation, then I'm going to flip through a bunch of slides and talk about some of the things that Bill talks about. A Vietnam veteran is defined as somebody who had boots on the ground anywhere in South Vietnam. Okay? Boots on the ground. So that included everybody, Navy, Coast Guard, etc., etc. Now there was also Navy personnel on board ships off the South China Sea and clear up into the Gulf of Tonkin. All of those Navy personnel were also classified as Vietnam veterans. What is really very interesting is that the Air Force personnel, some were stationed in Thailand flying missions over both North and South Vietnam. And some of the B-52s were coming as far away as Guam and in the Philippines as well. Long-range missions. All of those Air Force personnel that flew any sorties over North or South Vietnam are also classified as Vietnam veterans. Every branch of the service was including the Coast Guard. Most people aren't aware of that. These are some statistics from the Vietnam War, and I got these statistics from the Department of Defense. The actual conflict period, according to what happened around this time, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That's when we officially engaged in Vietnam, and it went through 1973. Followed Saigon, May 1st, 1975, and we were still involved trying to yank people out of there at that point in time. 2,594,000 American military men and women served in country in Vietnam. Mostly men. 7,484 women, and 83.5% were nurses, and most of them were Army nurses assigned to MASH units. And if you guys are old enough, you remember the old television show MASH. That was from Korea. That's what most MASH units were, but they looked exactly the same. Exactly the same. Here's some of the interesting statistics, though. 58,229 are the number of names that were initially inscribed on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. 47,000 plus actually died at the hands of the enemy, hostile deaths. Now look at that number, 10,811 are classified as a non-hostile death. So the big question is, what is a non-hostile death? It could be something as simple as a trucking accident, friendly fire. I went over, there was 5 of us that all went over at the same time. My one buddy got on a Chinook helicopter and it did not make it from point A to point B. It went down due to a mechanical, but they couldn't auto-rotate. 35 young men lost their lives in one crash. Boom, just like that. So accidents happen in a war zone. If the accident occurred in the war zone and it was not due to hostile, then and that's why they're classified as non-hostile deaths. Okay? 8 nurses, married men, 17,539. 61% of the men were 21 years of age or younger. There are 5 names that are on the wall. 4 of them, actually all 5 of them, forged their parents' signatures to be able to enlist. 4 of them were 16. The youngest, 15 years old. Wounded in action, hospitalized, disabled. Notice the number of amputees, even though we were there for an extremely long time. The nature of the warfare in Vietnam was different. Not quite as bad as some people make it out to be. Were there people injured due to booby traps and all of that kind of stuff? Absolutely. And they did have issues like that. Missing in action. At the end of the conflict period, up here, March of '73, there were 2,538 that were missing in action. As of, what is that there? March of 2011, that number is now down to 1,698. And actually the number is even a little bit less than that now, because there are different groups of people that go over there looking for body parts. You know, different things, they find them, they go back through the forensics that we have in today's age, and they're able to identify people. And they've been able to give closure to several hundreds of families where they didn't have it before. The MIA count, as an interesting sidelight here, the MIA count for the Vietnam conflict is the smallest number of MIAs for all the wars previous to that. So the number for World War II is in the 20,000 plus. World War I, even bigger than that. Right? Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, right? How many? Okay, here's the last tidbit on this particular page, and it was on that little short video. 25% of the forces that served in Vietnam were actually draftees. Okay, most people, and most of the movies and the literature that you read tries to build this picture that everybody that went to Vietnam was drafted, and it's all BS. 25% were actually draftees. You saw a number there. 66% were volunteers. So it's somewhere between 66 and 75% were actually volunteers. And many of those volunteers were multiple tour volunteers. I knew one Marine that did 5 tours. And you'll get this one. 5 tours, 5 hearts. 5 tours, 5 Purple Hearts. Unbelievable.
And he lived to tell about it?
He lived to tell about it.
God bless him.
And he's got a daughter who's actually a Marine Corps mate. 97% of Vietnam veterans did in fact receive an honorable discharge, and there was not a single military unit in the Vietnam conflict that surrendered to the enemy. Not a single group. During World War II, we had many units. Could have been a small one, a squad or something, but they did, in fact, surrender to the enemy. In Vietnam, we just didn't have that. We also didn't have that many desertions. In World War II, here, we reached desertions in zone, 20,000 convictions. In Vietnam, there were only 250 convictions. If somebody actually tried to skip out and leave, they were caught and convicted. When you're in Vietnam, where are you going to go? Can't speak the language? No? Pretty tough. I guess there were a few that didn't make it. All right. Let me talk about me now, and I'm going to go very, very quickly to give you my history. I graduated from high school in June of 1965 on a Friday. Monday.
You too, huh?
Monday of the next week, I started at the University of Arizona as a freshman in summer school. I was already 18 years old. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, guess what I got in the mail? Greetings.
You were one of that small percentage that was drafted.
So I was drafted, but because I was already in school, yeah, only 4 days into school. But the draft board did give me a little bit of mercy. They gave me a 2S deferment, which was a school deferment. Before lottery, it's my time, before lottery. I was a military brat. Everybody know what that is? Okay. So my stepdad was a Mustang, which means he was enlisted in World War II, came back, went to university, got his degree, was then able to get a commission in the United States Air Force. And I traveled around with him for a number of years. I went to 26 schools between K and 8, and I went to 3 high schools in 3 different states. Not only here in the United States, but I lived in France for a year, and I lived in Morocco and North Africa. So I had quite an interesting background. But the one thing I learned is if you're going to be in the military, be an officer, not an enlisted guy. Because rank does have its privileges. And that's what's the moral of the story for Mike. Because what Mike did is he went down to the local Navy Reserve Center in Tucson, Arizona. And I said, here's what I want to do. How do I do it, Chief? And the chief says, oh, I got a deal for you. We pulled out 2 contracts. One of them was a contract to be an enlisted reserve where I go down to the meetings, once a month and drill. And then he said, if you in fact get your degree in the time frame, then we're going to sign this contract here that takes and supersedes this one as soon as you complete all your degree requirements. And we'll send you to Officer Academy School. And that's what actually I was able to accomplish. Remember I said June 1965 is when I started. August 1968 is when I finished my last classes for degree completion. And I immediately went to Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. And then I finished, got commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy on 25 October 1968.
Okay.
When I got commissioned, they said, congratulations, you're now an ensign in the United States Navy. And oh, by the way, we're also going to designate you to be a Navy Supply Corps officer. And you have to go to more school. That's what I wanted, right? More school. 6 months more school down at the Navy Supply Corps School in Athens, Georgia. And that I finished that schooling in May of 1969. Go ahead. May of 1969 is when I finished that up. I immediately, I was one of the top 5 graduates from the Navy Supply Corps School. The top 5 of us all got orders to go to Vietnam, whether we were going to be stationed on the shore, or what, there was a couple of the guys that got stationed on ships that were over there at that point in time. So where I ended up going, and I'll finish the other part of that story, there's a place called Da Nang right up here. I don't think you can see it. And then right down here is Cam Ranh Bay. Those 2 places where the Navy Seabees built man-made ports. They built the port so we could unload the cargo ships that were being loaded here with all the food, the beer, the soda, the bullets, and the bombs. Okay? And I ended up being assigned to Da Nang to what they call the Naval Support Activity. I was assigned to the Freight Terminal Division. And my job title over there when I got there was Freight Expedite Officer. In English, what I was a trucking foreman. I was assigned a fleet of trucks and drivers, and it was my responsibility to interface with the stevedores that are taking the stuff off the ships to get the cargo out to the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, whoever it had to go to. Here's some pictures of Da Nang. This is downtown Da Nang. This picture was taken in 1969. It looks exactly the same in 2010. Some of our guys went back to Vietnam delivering wheelchairs from our organization. And it all looks exactly the same. Motorbikes, bicycles, the main mode of transportation. Here's some little sidewalk businesses, I call them. Notice that there is cement on the floor. And notice the cement on this building here. This building is actually a housing unit. Cement floors. Wherever there was cement floors over there, that meant that those families were upper middle class. Otherwise, they're living in hooches like this. Straw huts, bamboo is the frames of these things, the big bamboo shoots. Then some of those are the palm leaves off of the banana trees and other straw that they put to make it mesh together. All of these had dirt floors. That was the way. The farmer's market, a universal kind of thing, even way back then. There's a couple of local police guys. The temperature and the humidity in Vietnam, scorching. I arrived on July 4th, 1969. They opened the doors to the airplane. Within 3 minutes, all of us were soaking wet. It was probably about 95 and about 95% humidity. And that was pretty much a year-round thing. And then it was 100% humidity when the monsoon season. It just
rained so hard it hurt.
Shell gas station, right in the middle of GNA, right? This is kind of an interesting area here. This is a photo of what was called Red Beach. Red Beach was one of the initial beaches the Marines landed at in the early 60s when we were first setting up shop in Vietnam. And then way back there in the background, see this dirt area here? That's a Marine Corps ammo dump. Made many a trip out to that ammo dump, taking ammo out there. This whole area here today now is one of the major resorts in all of Southeast Asia. They've got golf courses, tennis courts, you know how they have the swimming pools in Hawaii or in the Bahamas where you can swim up to the bar and get your drinks and do all that. I mean, this is a major, major resort area. In other words, there are certain parts of Vietnam, primarily the old South Vietnam, where capitalism is alive and well. As you go further north into the old communist areas, you can see the difference in the economies and everything else. Here's some of these cargo ships waiting to be unloaded. This is a little harbor patrol boat that was always on the go there. This is a Navy refrigeration ship. Bring in some of the cold storage, some fresh food for us, some meats came in this way. Whoops, what happened? Who happened?
Hit that 5.
Huh?
Hit the button on that F5 button on the remote. Click on your PowerPoint and hit that 5. I did that.
Cargo ships. The point here is, notice all of these booms and winches and stuff. Notice the cargo net right here. A little hard to see. If you go across the Bay Bridge now and you look over to Port of Oakland, what do you see? A sea of containers, right? There were no containers back in those days. Everything went into the hull of the ship, and it was manhandled by stevedores and brought out, either put on a pallet and winched up or put into a cargo net like you're seeing on this particular picture here. So we had a lot of muscle that we needed to do. We then moved the cargo onto trucks, and they could have been little trucks or they could have been semis. It just depended on what kind of stuff it was. I had 180 trucks and drivers. 100 of them were South Vietnamese. They were being paid by us. Pardon me? Some of them were in English, others, they went through their little local interpreters. But the moral of the story was that about every 2 days, one of those trucks would disappear with a load of 2 or 3 pallets of beer, 2 or 3 pallets of soda.
Probably VC.
The black market, no, the black market was alive and well. Could it have been VC infiltrating and doing stuff? the drivers would disappear, the cargo would disappear, the truck would remain totally intact with the key in it, waiting for us to come pick it up. I'd get a call by the shore patrol saying, hey, Mike, bring a driver down here, we got another one of your trucks in here. And because they wanted us to move it, because they knew they were going to steal another truck at some point in time. Just crazy, black market stuff. This is an area called Bridge Ramp. It's an area up the GNA River slightly, where the ammunition that was being unloaded from the ammo ships would be unloaded onto one of these light boats right here, a small boat, or onto barges. Barges would then be brought up the river, we'd unload the ammo, put it onto the semi-truck trailers right here, and they would be taken out to the ammo dumps immediately. On these semis that you see right here, those are pallets of 500-pound bombs, and they can go out to the air base. Huey helicopters were the workhorse vehicle of the Vietnam conflict. I'm going to show some more pictures of Hueys in a minute. But they were there for ingress and extraction of personnel. They were the medevac helicopters. They were the mailmen. They were the supply sergeants. Everything. It just the Hueys did it. These are some pictures of a supply refrigeration area. Oops. Yeah, that's me.
That's you?
I was 22 there. Whoa. All this damage that was done, there was no direct impact on any buildings by anything. A 122 millimeter rocket hit an ammo dump that was right adjacent to these buildings. The rocket hit a cell of ammo, which caused a chain reaction explosion, and all the energy that came from that explosion blew out the mouth of the cell and hit all of this and caused all that damage. Now, we were very lucky. No one was injured that night. We were very, very lucky. Now, going back to this spot here, this ramp, because I worked, day shift was when we moved all the cargo and the ammo. Nighttime we didn't move cargo, because at nighttime was when Charlie tried to come in as close as they could to us and throw up mortars or rockets, and just occasionally they would get lucky to hit something. Usually they didn't. So, but here's when I had one of my major post-traumatic episodes. At nighttime we would put two young men, two sailors, into a Boston whaler. Boston whaler is a small outboard motorboat. Their job was to drive back and forth in front of this ramp and drop concussion grenades in the water as a preventative measure against Charlie coming in with satchel charges, explosive charges, and they go underwater. You see the movies where they have the straw, the reed, where they can breathe. They would try it. Now, the time I was there in Vietnam, it didn't happen, but it had earlier in the conflict. So the measure was we would drop concussion grenades in the water. But for 364 of the nights that I was in Vietnam, the sailors that were assigned to do that job did their job exactly the way they were supposed to be doing the job. One morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, the chief ran into the river here as far as he could go, where the cement was, because that's a man-made ramp there, and he found a piece of fiberglass about yay big. That was the only thing that we ever found of that Boston whaler. Those two young men are still, to this day, on the list of MIAs, because there were no body parts found. Now, why did I mention PTSD? Because I was the officer that assigned those two young men to that job that night. I was the officer, I was their division officer, division officer, and because I had the responsibility of writing home the letter to the parents. Let me tell you, that was a gut-wrenching experience for me, and it still eats away at me. Still eats away at me. What else do I have on this slide? That's it. Two other real quick stories, and I'm going to show you some pictures from Bill, who was a grunt. For every 10 people that were in Vietnam, 8 of those people were in direct support of those guys that were outside the wire, up close and personal with the enemy. Okay, I was one of the 8. I was a rare area guy. In fact, for the whole time that I was in Vietnam, and I received a magical 45 minutes of training on how to shoot a 45 pistol before I went over, and I got 45 minutes of training on an M16. Yeah, it's big time training. You probably got more than that, John, huh?
Just a little.
Yeah. Yeah, we had very little. As a naval officer, I got very little of that stuff. Now, I did, everybody that went to Vietnam got to go on R&R, rest and recuperation. John, where'd you go?
Well, that's a long story, but suffice to say, I didn't take advantage of it. I went and saw a buddy of mine over the Cambodian border. I grew up with him.
Okay.
And we got mortared, rocketed almost every night. So that's why
I
was
did
ready.
my research. I was 23 by then, young and dumb. And I did all my research, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go to Sydney, Australia. You know, February down under is summertime.
Yes, it is.
And guess where I wanted to spend all my time?
In the winter.
At the beach, looking at the beautiful lakes.
Yeah.
So I got on the airplane, went to Sydney, Australia, and then my recollection gets very, very foggy. But everybody that I went to Australia with told me that I had a hell of a good time.
There you go. Big old strong Australian beer.
Yeah. Foster's 12% beer, yeah. Very good beer.
Reese's Pilsen before you go.
No pictures ever surfaced.
It's funny that you asked that question, because about 10 years after I got back, I did find a canister of film. And I opened it up and looked at it, and I went, oh my God. I rolled it up, put it back in the little canister, and it's in my safety deposit box at the bank right now. And it's going to stay there. It's been very incriminating. Never, I could see enough by just looking at it.
You can see enough of what he's doing.
Mike, were you a party animal in your younger days? Now, I'm not saying you don't have the energy still you do, but we've all had our.
I party pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, I also, again, remember I said, I was assigned to the Naval Support Activity in Da Nang. The Naval Support Activity received a Navy Unit Commendation Medal while I was there. Because of that, all of the junior officers received a special chit from our bosses, the captain, and we got to go on a second R&R. We went to Bangkok, Thailand on that little project. That one I kept myself sober, and I remembered, and I had a great time. So I want to talk a little bit about my friend Bill Green, who's not here today. Bill was a sergeant in the Army, and he actually went down in May of 1967 to volunteer to go into the Army. And he checked a box on his paperwork that said he had asthma. He got rejected from enlistment. 3 months later, he gets this piece of paper from the government, and it says, "Greetings. This is draft notice. You're hereby ordered for induction into the Army." He went ahead and went in. So he had a 2-year commitment as a sergeant. He did go directly to Vietnam after some training. He did get to do what he wanted to do, was go hunt people, shoot guns, and do that kind of thing. In fact, he ended up being a point man for his squad. A point man is the person that leads the squad, and it's their responsibility to find the booby traps, anything like that.
He lived to tell them.
He did live to tell them. Yeah. He was actually the point man. He kept volunteering, and he was a point man for 6 months until he got promoted to sergeant, which was pretty amazing. And everybody else loved him for doing that because, you're at the front and something happens, it's you
They
that
know where
knows.
not to step.
And then once he got promoted to sergeant, the first 2 guys he put in charge to be the point man for his squad, they both got injured and both were sent home early. Bill didn't lose anybody while he was there, but of his 10 people, including him and his squad, he turned over 90% of them, not including himself. And some of them, a couple of amputees, a lot of injuries. Some of them had multiple injuries. My friend Bill has 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars for meritorious efforts in doing so. Bill was located in east of Chuai here, up in the mountains at the Laotian border. And he talks about all the different animals that he saw, the different jungle. They had triple canopy jungle, where it was up to 200 feet high, where you had trees. And sometimes you literally could not see the sunlight, the sun rays clear down to the floor. So it was so thick. We'll talk a little bit more about that. These are some photos of Bill's that shows where he was. He was in the 198th Light Infantry. This is back at a base camp. These are some of the young men that he was with. Here's some of those jungle areas where he was. And if you look closely down, if you're looking down, you can actually see some rice paddies. Bill stuck this one in here because he does not have an affinity for monkeys. As the point man, when you're in that triple canopy jungle and you run into a school of monkeys, what do they do to warn their fellow monkeys? They start squawking and chattering and letting everybody and their uncle know. Well, when they let the other monkeys know, they also let Charlie know that they were in there. So it's kind of a cumbersome thing. And Bill also talks about, so Bill doesn't like monkeys, not at all. He has a few comments. But he did have an affinity for George here. And I don't know if you can see George on his shoulder there. That's a baby mongoose. The other thing that Bill hated were snakes. And we had every variety of snake in the world. Asps, all different kinds. Mongoose eats snakes, therefore Bill loved his baby mongoose that was eating the snakes. Here's some of those photos of the choppers. You see that there's a door gunner sitting in that one. Some guys coming in or going out.
Like the animal.
Now, interesting, this next couple of photos here, here's some of the natives, the Mamazans. Here's the hooch. If you look real closely, right in here, that's a sniper. Very closely right in there. This is a bombed out Catholic church. This is a bombed out Buddhist temple. Now look very carefully right here. What does that look like?
I can see it, I tell you.
Swastika.
That's what it looks like.
It looks like it, but it's sort of turned the wrong ways. That is the Buddhist sign for peace.
Not wrong.
Is that something? So here's some pictures of the young guy, the men that were in Bill's squad. That's Bill there. That's Bill. A lot of young men, and many of them didn't last their full time in their tours in Vietnam. Now Bill will say, when he talks, he says, I was in Vietnam that whole time, and I only took 5 showers the whole year I was in Vietnam. Because he was a drunk, he was out in the bush, out in the field. He says, now, sometimes on Saturday nights we didn't get to go to the watering hole up in the river, up in the mountains. And that would be in there, just taking, trying to take a little bit of a bath. Now we'll tell the rest of the story about the water in just a minute. There's the photos of sandbags. Young faces, huh? Young
Indeed.
faces. Now, two last items I'll cover. Agent Orange. Everybody know what Agent Orange is? Roundup on steroids. Roundup on double steroids. This is the planes dropping the agent to kill the jungles, so they didn't have to send troops into the jungles to find the enemy.
Defoliation.
Defoliation. And about 2 to 3 days later, it looks like this. Just wipes it out. So does the enemy have any place to hide? No, unless they buried underground, which in a lot of places in Vietnam, they were called the tunnel rats, and they built all these massive networks of tunnels into the mountains and stuff. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stories about that. The unfortunate part about the Agent Orange is that it would wash off of those trees into the jungles, into the water system, and they didn't know that it had a dioxin. Okay? The dioxins have caused massive problems in the years since then. We have about 130 guys in our Vietnam veterans group. I will tell you that probably about 55 to 60% have something that's caused from Agent Orange poisoning. In today's, the last couple of censuses, remember I said how many? 2,594,000? There's less than 1 million of us left alive. And many of us are suffering from the Agent Orange stuff. Here's, again, the picture of the guys in the water, because the water, that's where it was. And even for me, 90 miles away down in Da Nang, down the river, this stuff flows downhill. Now, Bill always likes to get the story, that it's the water, and I used to drink the water, and I used to deposit stuff back into the water, and then Mike had to drink the water, so he's trying to get you to it. There's a list of presumptive diseases if you were exposed to the Agent Orange. And this blows it up a little bit. Look at what number 2 is, type 2 diabetes. Number 3 is ischemic heart disease, Parkinson's, Hodgkin's, multiple myeloma. And the list on the other side there had probably some of those ones you can't even pronounce, the carcinomas and stuff.
Is it the further down you go, like number 1 is the top disease you get, or just they're all over the board?
They're all over the place. Most of them are being added on, and actually ischemic and type 2 diabetes were added up, and there were so many of them that they got moved up the list. It's like this thing at the top, I can't even pronounce it, chloracne, was something that had to show up on you, usually within, I think it says 2 years of coming back, or something like that. And if you didn't, then you couldn't try to put a claim for it. There are still people that are putting in for claims of things that have occurred and are occurring, and that includes PTSD. There can be claims put in for that kind of stuff. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Now I want to wrap up by just sharing a couple of thoughts. John, were there drugs in Vietnam?
Yeah, but not as many, not as many as they like to pick it out.
There were, as Bill says, there were some damn fine drugs. And I'm here as an officer to tell you I ended up having to put one young man into federal penitentiary because he started a business.
Yeah.
He started a drug business. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think a lot of it had to do with where you were.
A lot of it was the rear area guys had a tendency of getting into more trouble.
Yes, indeed.
The rear area
Pretty
guys.
idle moments.
Yeah, and a lot of guys, would drink themselves silly, and then they'd smoke some pot, and they'd go crazy. One young guy got, as Bill says, stoned to the bejesus, and he wanted to go home. So he stole the mic boat. He couldn't get the ramp all the way up, but he did get it untied from the pier where it was.
What did he steal?
A mic boat.
Oh.
The boat with the ramp in the front. He didn't get it all the way up. But he got it out into the river and was maneuvered. He was going to go out into the Da Nang Harbor, and he says, I'm going home to San Francisco. That's what he told everybody. Luckily for him, he passed out, and the harbor patrol got on board. And yes, there was water coming on board. If it had been maybe 20 minutes more, the thing would have sunk. But he was very lucky. But he too ended up doing time in a federal penitentiary because of what he did. Now, Bill would tell...
Not LBJ, huh?
Yeah.
Long been in jail.
A lot of... what Bill would tell you is that each squad was a little bit different, especially the guys that were out in the bush. But how would you like to be out in the bush and you're in a foxhole and somebody had just smoked and they're on guard duty and all they're thinking about is that glass of milk, the bowl of Oreos and peanut butter or whatever the stuff is that you eat? Would you like to be guarded by somebody like that? And the answer was no. So they policed it amongst themselves. They wouldn't allow anybody to do anything like that because you're protecting my life, you stay clean. I'm going to protect your life and I'm going to stay clean and make sure you're going to be okay. Okay, so it was situational, as John says. The rare area guys were the ones that got into most trouble. Always. Rare area guys were the ones that get into trouble. Another movies about Vietnam. During the early years of the conflict, you had the movies like Platoon, Apocalypse Now, Hamburger Hill, Good Morning Vietnam. There's the slew of them, right? And all of those movies, in my opinion, those were Hollywood movies. Okay, they were about 10 to 15% accurate. They were Hollywood because they had to have a story. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? Hold on a second. Now the movie that you want to think about, if you want to see something that really gives you a flavor about Vietnam, that's the movie called We Were Soldiers. It's a Mel Gibson movie. It's only about maybe 8 years old. It is the story of one battle that lasted 3 days.
Horrific.
And the beauty, yeah, there was a horrific movie because there was the amount of casualties was devastating. And it shows what I call flashback images of showing clips at the home front when the wives or the sisters or the mothers are receiving the telegrams that said you've lost your son or daughter.
Colonel
Al Moore, and then Joe Galloway was the embedded reporter, and they wrote a book together. And again, the movie was only based on half the book. That is a great book, and it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. They keep showing We Were Soldiers. I've seen it probably twice already this year. Where I've seen it. Was it? Okay. Lives?
I should have asked you this on your radio interview, but the late and great Robin Williams, who played Adrian Cronauer in Good Morning Vietnam, which I use that on my radio show now. I love that. Did you actually hear Adrian Cronauer when you were there?
We had Stars and Stripes radio, and so we had Stars and Stripes newspapers that came to the rear area guys.
So you heard.
We heard people on the radio. Can I relate to that name? No, I can't relate.
But did you hear crazy things like in Good Morning Vietnam? You know, Robin Williams, who portrayed Adrian Cronauer, pushed the boundaries, but actually was quite entertaining for the troops out there, which is what they really needed.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. It was interesting, you know, and some of the guys got to when you were in the rear areas, you got to participate sometimes in USO shows. So you got to see the Bob Hopes or the Ann Margaret's, those kind of folks. The last thought for you, because this is something I end up every talk with, is that for me and for Bill, we've been doing this for a long, long time. And this, in fact, is a form of therapy for us. We get to talk, which most guys about Vietnam don't like to talk about Vietnam. Sometimes like pulling teeth to get them to say anything. But I want to thank all of you for being here today, for listening to my story a little bit. If you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I want to thank you specifically for being my therapist for the last hour.
Wow. Hey, Mike.
Hi.
One other question, not too personal, and if it's too personal, I can edit it. I mean, you never suffered for like PTSD or anything like that, or?
Oh, absolutely I do.
But you handle it so well. I mean, you can't even tell.
PTSD is relative, and by relative I mean each person gets exposed and sees things that affect them in different ways.
Okay.
So think of PTSD, because PTSD can happen to anybody. A woman gets raped. That is one major traumatic PTSD episode. You're in an automobile accident and your friend is in the seat next to you and gets killed. There's another one. Now think of being in that automobile accident 3 to 4 times a week for 52 weeks. And then you get the nature of what PTSD is all about.
Wow.
Now, also understand that every time that happens, there's an adrenaline rush, and excess adrenaline into the system has negative effects on the other parts of your system and your organs. Okay, and sometimes those are not really well-known things that that you can really pinpoint. I can be driving. I listen to. I can't remember the 103.7, the oldies FM station, and I'll have that on, and I'm driving along, and all of a sudden a song comes on, and I'll start crying, be bawling like a baby. Why? I have no clue, other than I know what I did when I was in Vietnam. Now, when I worked that night shift, myself and 2 other buddies, we spent a bunch of money and bought a Gerard turntable with a diamond needle. Talk about old technology, right? A TX 9-inch reel-to-reel recording unit, and it had some Pioneer speakers. And there was like 4 of us that all pooled our money, and I have at home right now a box of about 100 9-inch reel-to-reels with hours and hours and hours of music of that time. And why? I mean, I don't have anything to play with anymore, so one of these days I'm going to find something and maybe do something with it. But it helped us to while away the time. Yeah, it's a player. It's not a video. It's an audio. TX audio recording. So, any questions? Any other questions?
Do you have an opinion on the Vietnam War context in terms of, I mean, I'll be very forthright to tell you that, in my opinion, the Vietnam War is the biggest waste of human life in our country's history, other than the Civil War. And the reason being because it's all politics, we put a wild and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a shame that this government, our government, who I love, the United States, I don't take a backseat to anybody. Our government and citizenry around them have not learned from our war. They continue to go and do in Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, and it's just a shame.
And after
a lot of good boys.
I mean, we go over there for the right reasons, to fight communism at that time. Yeah. And to me that was true, and there's evidence of that being true because of the nature of how they're living today. In the old South, not North, because North was under wraps.
There's a book out called, been out for a while, called The President's Club, and it's the special relationship between the sitting president and all the living former presidents. The back channel, communication, the health, and this and that. Read that and you will come away, for those of you who remember Richard Nixon, you will come away with a further disgust of Richard Nixon and how he used Vietnam War to his political advantage.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a lot of them do a lot of different things. The politics back then were they were dirty, they're nasty, they're idiots. I mean, The guys were not allowed to win.
Yep.
My friend Bill was in an area that was called a free fire zone. That means if anything moved in that area, they could shoot it. Okay? But there's a lot of the guys that were not in those areas, and they had to call and get permission even when they were being shot at.
MACB rules of engagement is called.
I've got to go. Thank you so much.
We can go on.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to be here tonight.
She's good at it.
Yeah, so it's a...
Can I use?
Are you? Oh, that's you.
1968.
Who wrote the President's Club?
I don't remember. One of the guys is appears on the national news programs a lot. I can picture him, but I don't remember his name. There's two guys actually that collaborated. You can get it up on Amazon.
I was just
It's a
thinking,
phenomenal
I want to make sure I get the right one, because sometimes they have the same.
President's Club.
What do you think, Elias?
I say we give Mike a big round of applause before I shut the video down. Oh, Mike, that was